What if I told you there was a king who ascended the throne at 16, ruled for 52 years, led his nation to unprecedented prosperity, yet met destruction through pride at the peak of success? Would you believe this story? This is the tale of King Uzziah, the ninth monarch of Judah, living in the 8th century BC, an era of turmoil and unrest. 2 Kings chapter 15 records, when Uzziah inherited the throne, Judah faced internal strife and external threats. His father Amaziah's arrogant defeat by Israel left Jerusalem's walls demolished, temple treasures plundered. Amid this devastation, young Uzziah assumed power, confronting a crumbled kingdom, enemies encircling borders, economic collapse looming, and demoralized military forces. 2 Chronicles chapter 26 reveals Uzziah sought the Lord, and God granted him success. He did what was right in divine sight, following his father Amaziah's initial ways. He prayed daily before God, consulted prophets for major decisions, restored temple worship, reinstated priestly duties, appointed teachers of the law, educating people about Yahweh, frequently worshipped in the temple, seeking divine guidance. These spiritual pursuits laid foundations for future triumphs. Yet within this promising start lurked seeds of tragedy. As power and glory increased, as the nation grew stronger, as people cheered their ruler, pride's poisonous root took hold. This narrative reveals the peril of power and arrogance, a timeless warning about success and downfall. Let us journey through Uzziah's world, witness a great king's rise and collapse in Judah's historical chronicles. Few monarchs ascended at 16. Uzziah stands unique among them. 2 Chronicles 25 records, during the reign of his father King Amaziah, he recruited 100,000 Israelite warriors, spending 100 talents of silver, but disbanded them after a prophet's warning. This provoked fierce anger among the Israelites, who plundered cities across Judah, taking 3,000 people captive. More shockingly, after defeating the Edomites, King Amaziah brought back their idols, set them up as his own gods, and bowed down to burn incense, greatly provoking the Lord's wrath. 2 Kings 14 reveals, King Amaziah's arrogant pride led him to challenge Israel's King Jehoash, resulting in crushing defeat at Beth-Shemesh. Jerusalem's walls were demolished, temple treasures of gold and silver plundered, and Amaziah himself taken captive to Samaria. In this devastated context, young Uzziah inherited the throne, facing a kingdom in ruins. 2 Chronicles 26 documents, upon ascending to power, Uzziah first confronted military threats. The Philistines loomed in the west, occupying coastal plains, controlling vital trade routes, constantly raiding Judah's borders. To the east, the Ammonites stirred unrest, occupying Transjordan territories, allying with Moabites, threatening Judah's eastern frontier. Southern deserts saw Arab tribes whose nomadic clans frequently ambushed merchant caravans, seizing goods and livestock. From the north, victorious Israel watched hungrily, fresh from defeating Amaziah, poised to strike southward again. Economically, the national treasury neared collapse, temple gold and silver vessels looted. The people suffered extreme hardship, agriculture and commerce lay crippled, farmlands abandoned from warfare, trade routes severed by conflict, displaced populations wandered, city populations dwindling drastically. Politically, Amaziah's catastrophic failures shattered royal authority, public trust in monarchy evaporated. Officials pursued selfish agendas, regional powers vied for control. The priestly class faltered, with the temple desecrated, plunging the nation into chaos. Yet in this crisis, Uzziah demonstrated extraordinary wisdom. 2 Chronicles 26 records. He sought the Lord, and God granted him success. He followed David's example, seeking divine guidance, consulting prophets for major decisions. In Turbulent times, he understood dependence on the Lord was the nation's only hope. He rebuilt Jerusalem's defenses, strengthened the military, restored temple worship, reviving the people's hope. Though young, Uzziah displayed remarkable maturity, recognizing national restoration required not just military might, but spiritual wisdom, daily seeking God's direction, making careful decisions. Governing with justice, these qualities laid his success foundation. Militarily, Uzziah demonstrated exceptional skill, reconstructing Jerusalem's walls, building watchtowers in wilderness, carving cisterns in forests to sustain his livestock. He trained a professional army organized by secretaries and officers, producing advanced weapons in Jerusalem, dramatically boosting military power. The Chronicle documents his victories over Philistines, demolishing Gath's walls, destroying Jabneh and Ashdod, building cities in Philistine territory, subduing Ammonites for tribute. His fame reached Egypt through growing strength. Strategically, Uzziah built comprehensive defenses, establishing border fortresses, creating observation towers, forming layered protection systems before expanding outward, first reclaiming coastal plains, controlling trade routes, then conquering Ammonites, finally extending influence to Egypt's borders. His reforms included specialized weapon workshops, modern siege engines like catapults, military branch divisions, infantry cavalry engineers, each receiving specific training, implementing standing army protocols. This visionary restructuring catapulted Judah's military to unprecedented capabilities in urban development. Uzziah invested substantial resources. He rebuilt Jerusalem's city walls, constructing towers at strategic points, including the corner gate, the valley gate, and the wall's turning points. These towers served dual purposes as defensive structures and elevated watchtowers providing early threat detection. He built observation posts throughout wilderness regions, establishing a comprehensive early warning network. Along border areas, numerous reservoirs were carved in forested territories, supporting both agricultural irrigation and military water supply needs. These infrastructure projects enhanced national security while stimulating economic growth. Regarding military technology, Uzziah engineered sophisticated weaponry, pioneering advanced siege engines including catapults and chariot-mounted crossbows, significantly boosting combat effectiveness. He innovated wall designs, incorporating arrow towers and concealed access points, reinforcing defensive capabilities. A military communication system, utilizing signal fires and carrier pigeons, greatly improved troop mobility. Economically, Uzziah implemented systematic reforms, developing irrigation networks, constructing reservoirs and water channels, revitalizing agricultural production. He promoted commerce by building secure trade routes, fostering safe merchant travel. Artisan crafts flourished, particularly in arms manufacturing, spurring industrial development, establishing structured taxation, increased national revenue, while fostering foreign trade relations with neighboring nations as recorded in 2 Chronicles chapter 26. He grew exceedingly powerful through seeking the Lord's guidance. God prospered his endeavors. All achievements stemmed from his reverence and dependence on divine wisdom. Yet as national strength increased, amid public acclaim and expanding influence, Uzziah's heart underwent transformation. Accomplishments became fuel for personal pride, a toxic root gradually spreading through his consciousness. Here is the translated text formatted for YouTube narration, maintaining biblical accuracy while being accessible and profound. This is a profoundly thought-provoking phenomenon. Success often leads us astray more easily than failure. When everything goes smoothly, we tend To forget God's grace and lose sight of our true identity, King Uzziah's achievements during his reign marked an unprecedented era in Judah's history. He not only restored national strength, but elevated the kingdom to new heights. His military strategies, his administrative wisdom, his architectural accomplishments, all became legendary through generations. Yet behind these achievements lurked the seeds of pride. When standing atop the mountain of success, we often forget all these come from God's grace, God's guidance, and God's blessings. This became the hidden prelude to Uzziah's eventual downfall. 2 Chronicles 26 records. Uzziah's fame spread far and wide, for he became exceedingly powerful. Yet these glorious accomplishments became fuel for his arrogance as power and glory increased. As the nation grew stronger, as people cheered their king, the poisonous root of pride grew silently. Gradually, he forgot all achievements flowed from God's grace. 2 Chronicles 26 reveals when he became strong, his heart became arrogant, leading to unfaithfulness. He trespassed against the Lord his God, entering the Lord's temple to burn incense on the altar. This constituted a grave violation, for according to the law, only consecrated priests could burn temple incense, a sacred office ordained by God. No one dared to usurp this role. Priest Azariah, with 80 courageous priests, confronted King Uzziah. They boldly challenged the king. Uzziah, it is not for you to burn incense to the Lord. This belongs to Aaron's descendants, the consecrated priests. They urgently warned him, leave the sanctuary now, for you have trespassed. This act will bring you no honor from the Lord God. Yet King Uzziah raged with anger. He took a censer to burn incense, as he vented fury at the priests. Before all the priests at the incense altar in the temple of the Lord, leprosy broke out on his forehead. This was the Lord's direct judgment. For according to the law, only priests could burn incense in the sanctuary, a sacred duty God specifically ordained. No one dared to usurp this role. 2 Chronicles 26 records. When high priest Azariah and all priests saw the leprosy on his forehead, they urgently drove him out. He himself hurried to leave, for the Lord had struck him. A shocking moment unfolded. A mighty king in an instant fell from the pinnacle of power into the abyss, plunged from glorious throne to disgrace. King Uzziah remained leprous till death, not merely physical affliction but spiritual judgment. Thus he lived in isolation, separated from the Lord's temple, symbolizing separation from God and loss of royal authority. A profound lesson emerges. Pride comes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. When humans forget their true nature, forget divine grace, disregard God's statutes, disaster inevitably follows. 2 Chronicles 26 states all. Uzziah's deeds from beginning to end are recorded in Isaiah's prophetic book, an eternal warning, reminding generations to maintain reverent fear. Uzziah's pride did not form overnight but grew gradually through prolonged success. As he saw his army strengthen, his nation prosper, his people acclaim him, his heart began shifting. He forgot all was God's grace, started claiming credit for himself, ceased seeking God as before, stopped consulting prophets for guidance, abandoned reverent awe, gradually losing fear of God, disrespecting sacred laws, disregarding priestly authority. This arrogant mindset ultimately drove him to violate God's holy ordinances, burning incense in the temple without authorization. This was a grave mistake. According to the law of Moses, only the descendants of Aaron could serve as priests and burn incense in the sanctuary. These were divinely ordained regulations. No one dared overstep this boundary. When the priests saw Uzziah preparing to burn incense, they immediately confronted him. They reminded the king this duty belonged to priests, not to earthly rulers. They warned Uzziah clearly, Such actions would provoke God's wrath. Yet, Uzziah became enraged. He took the censer, insisted on burning incense. At the moment of his defiance, God's judgment struck instantly. Leprosy broke out on his forehead. A terrifying moment unfolded. A mighty monarch fell from power's pinnacle, plunged into disgrace. In ancient times, leprosy meant physical disfigurement, social isolation, and most crucially, it symbolized divine judgment, God's wrath and his punishment. Uzziah lived in isolation thereafter, confined to a separate palace, barred from the temple, excluded from worship, stripped of royal authority. His son Jotham assumed governance, managing affairs, ruling the people. This narrative stands as an enduring lesson. Pride is the greatest enemy. When humans forget their place, disregard God's grace, ignore divine statutes, disaster inevitably follows. Uzziah's story, recorded in Isaiah's scroll, serves as perpetual warning, calling all generations to walk in reverence. Humble before God, obey his commandments, honor his divine order. This lesson remains a vital warning for us today. 2 Chronicles 26 records. King Uzziah lived with leprosy until his death. He dwelled in a separate house, cut off from the temple of the Lord. This marks a heartbreaking conclusion. A once mighty monarch, now isolated in quarantine, separated from the sanctuary, estranged from his people, removed from the seat of power. His son Jotham oversaw the palace and governed the nation. For Uzziah, this proved a crushing humiliation. Plunged from regal heights into obscurity, cast down from glory into disgrace. Leprosy ravaged not just his body, but stripped away his royal dignity. In that cultural context, leprosy was seen as a divine curse. Afflicted ones viewed as unclean, required to live in isolation. The chronicler notes carefully, all Uzziah's acts from first to last are recorded in Isaiah's prophetic scroll, serving as an eternal warning. During his quarantine years, Uzziah had ample time for reflection. He remembered past triumphs, recalled ambitious projects, contemplated his arrogance, relived that fateful decision. Perhaps he heard echoes of priests' urgent warnings, felt the sting of his own rage, sensed the sudden skin lesions, re-experienced expulsion from the temple. Yet the hour for repentance had passed. His pride yielded irreversible consequences. He forfeited royal privileges, lost his subjects. Loyalty was barred from temple worship. Life in confinement brought soul-crushing loneliness, exclusion from public ceremonies, separation from family, banishment from sacred spaces, inability to govern. Daily he gazed through windows, watching the world he once ruled, observing cities he built, surveying achievements now fading. Such existence for a formerly powerful king. What anguish, what pain, what humiliation. Though Jotham governed the kingdom, father and son grew distant. Legal purity codes restricted visits. Lepers remained ceremonially unclean. This isolation inflicted not just physical suffering but profound psychological wounds. 2 Chronicles chapter 26 records Uzziah resting with his ancestors, buried in the burial field near the royal tombs. Though kings were traditionally interred in royal graves, his leprosy became the reason for this extraordinary burial arrangement. A king's body laid in common ground, separated from regal resting places. What profound humiliation this represented. The honor reserved for monarchs was stripped from him due to disease. No grand ceremonies marked his passing, no crowds gathered to mourn, no elaborate funeral procession occurred, only simple rites observed by a handful of close companions, silent grief accompanying the burial. His son Jotham succeeded the throne, perhaps Uzziah's sole consolation. While his dynasty continued, the king's legacy became a lasting warning. A sobering conclusion emerges. Once a God-seeking ruler blessed by divine favor, pride ultimately stripped all honors, This reminds us to maintain reverence, never forgetting God's grace. Uzziah's fate stands as both personal tragedy and eternal cautionary tale. Proverbs chapter 16 verses 18 manifests vividly here. Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. James chapter 4 verses 6 finds concrete expression. God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. Through Uzziah's story we witness how pride corrupts gradually. A God-seeking heart can become defiant. Blessings may turn to discipline. This transformation doesn't occur suddenly, but through prolonged success under power's intoxication, amid public adulation. Pride silently takes root. Let this historical account resonate as living truth for modern believers, a mirror reflecting our own vulnerability to arrogance's subtle encroachment. He was once a thriving monarch, undefeated in military campaigns, implemented wise policies in governance, built a prosperous economy. Yet these accomplishments became fuel for his arrogance. He forgot these achievements stemmed from God's grace, lost his posture of reverence, abandoned obedience to God's ordinances, ultimately facing destruction. This narrative delivers crucial warnings for modern leaders when surrounded by power and glory. Maintain awe before the Almighty. Never forget divine favor. Regularly examine your inner life. Guard against pride's encroachment. Cultivate humility. Seek divine guidance constantly. Respect God's established order. Walk in His commandments. Bring major decisions before God in prayer. Continually remind yourself every blessing flows from His grace, not human achievement. Such spiritual posture invites God's blessing, prevents pride-induced downfall. Uzziah's story reveals success often blinds more than failure. In times of prosperity, humans easily forget their true nature, overlook divine benevolence. Yet God remains just, repaying each according to their deeds. Uzziah's fate manifests heaven's righteous judgment. This reminds us to keep searching our hearts, never let pride take root, maintain humble dependence, persistently seek God's direction. Uzziah's account also reveals divine mercy. Though disciplined, God preserved his life, extended his royal lineage. This demonstrates judgment contains grace, divine correction serves redemption, guiding us back to Him. Let Uzziah's story teach us, walk reverently in God's ways, never permit pride's domination. If this message resonates, share it widely. Let's grow together in God's truth. Share your thoughts and reflections in the comments below. Let's explore these profound lessons collectively.